Okay, so this is a brief video that we're going to go over different versions of the creative revision and talk about some of the things that really worked, and how some of my students have taken the process and somehow like translated it into an online space where other people can really see how this works. So you'll see the students' work in the portfolio video as well. Um, and like overall, she just did a terrific job with this entire assignment of the portfolio and seemed to have a really good sort of like feeling about how to go take any kind of medium and turn it into something that was online, right? So she did a revision of her first project, which was a rhetorical analysis or genre analysis of a an advertisement about pollution, um, and then turned it into this really interesting art piece. Okay, so what we have here is basically her creative revision page where she not only like gives us right a picture of the final product, right, but she included this kind of like scrolling slideshow of close-ups of the different pieces of it, um, and then gives us a a documentation of the process, which like I personally, as someone who is interested in art but who sucks at it, found really interesting. Like this was such a cool thing to see this process come to life. So and again, like I tell my students every semester, like you do not have to be like Van Gogh or somebody to do these kinds of projects, and like even people who are incredibly talented artists, um, like I don't expect you to spend a month and a half working on one piece of work for me, right? So like do the best that you can do in the time that you have, and like for the most part, what I really want is for you guys to have a chance to kind of like go outside of the norms for what you do in an English class, and to get a chance to like experience what it's like to take something that's written and turn it into something different and new. Um, So here's her preface. I'm gonna say right now that the preface is really the hardest part of this entire assignment. Like, um, in the preface, and I know I had explained this in the creative revision handout, and I'll go over it again, but you basically explain, right, the rhetorical situation of the original project, right, whichever project one or two, whichever one you decided to alter, you're gonna explain what that initial rhetorical situation was, right? So what was the audience, what was the topic, what was the angle, what was the purpose, right? And what was the context, right? And the context is usually the thing that students will change with this, when they start to go into like these kind of revisionary processes, which means like the original context was an essay for my English instructor, and the new context is a piece of art for people who are interested in climate change or environmental conservation, right? Or my new piece is, a TikTok video for people who are, highly invested in the Nike brand, right? Like it's the context, the new context can be anything. Very few of my students decide to change to basically stay with an essay and just change the audience or the purpose or something like that. Um, and frankly, like it is probably a bit more fun to take a piece of writing and turn it into something else rather than just change it into a different type of writing. But I encourage you guys to do whatever you have time for and what you have interest for and what you find compelling. So you'll, with your preface, you'll explain the original document's rhetorical situation, and then you will explain the new rhetorical situation, right? So she says, my new rhetorical situation differs from the rhetorical situation in the original draft, given that my original draft's audience is individuals who care about marine life in some capacity. Um, and she says, my creative revision is geared toward individuals who don't understand topics within the larger scope of marine life, global warming, and ocean pollution. So right here, she's making a differentiation between the audience, right? She's saying this is for a new audience. And she says her original draft's purpose was to persuade people to believe in a cause, and the new purpose is to inform people about the effect of ocean pollution. So the first one was like, hey, we have to do something about this thing. And her new purpose is more of an educational thing, right? So it's not like a call to action so much as like, hey, here's this information and here's what's happening here. Um, and so you'll see her kind of like go through the different bits and pieces of her rhetorical situation and sort of like note what's changed about it and why it's changed and how. Um, and she importantly makes clear references to the revision itself, right? So she's illustrated the detriments of plastic being in the ocean, right? Sick fish and poison chemicals. And so she's constantly kind of pointing back to the art piece itself and saying, like, here's this part of the art represents this. This part of this art is doing this, and kind of explaining how her argument changed and what the new piece is communicating fully. Um, right here you see these boats represent the two organizations mentioned in my original draft, right? So she says um, the boats have names on them, right? If we'll go back up here, see the names we have here and here, right? And so she put those in there to have a specific purpose, and then she explains what that purpose is in the preface, right? Um, Including, and she explains the Chilean flag and all kinds of different things. So this is kind of, and again, I'm going to link to this so that you guys can look at it and kind of see what she's doing right. But again, like um, this is a really good example of someone, right, taking a piece of writing, turning it into a completely different medium, and then writing a pretty spectacular preface that like analyzes that new art piece and shows exactly how that art piece is representing her larger argument, even if that larger argument has changed in a few different ways. Right, so she has her preface here and the original draft here, and then her bibliography. And then what she did down here, and this is again a really important thing, is I want you guys to be able to point to um, the genre or an example of the genre that you're copying, right? So here she has um, the murals that inspired her for this piece of art. I want you to be able to do the same thing, and not only that, I want you to be able to say um, what what you're copying, like what sort of features from that other thing that you're copying. So if you do a comic strip and you like really love Archie comics for various reasons, you say, okay, I did a comic strip, I made it off of Archie because I love Archie. Here's the things from the Archie comic, right? The sort of like the design elements, right, that I'm copying. I'm copying the the general like art itself and the way that the characters are painted, or I'm copying, you know, the way that they use their font or the pacing or the this or the that. I want you guys to be able to say like my new my creative revision, right, is this kind of thing, right? It's a piece of art, it's a comic, it's a song, it's a whatever, and then be able to say like, here's an example of a similar type of song or a similar piece of art or a similar comic, right? And these are the elements of this other thing that I'm copying, that I'm trying to imitate in my own work, right? I'm trying to think of another example. So, um, yeah, like if you have a like a if you wanted to do a song, for instance, and you have a favorite artist who shapes their has like a specific sort of like lyrical pattern or includes certain sorts of like musical elements or whatever in their work, you know, that would be the kind of thing you'd say, okay, this is, you know, the sort of uh, shape and tone or whatever of the song is copied from this or is an imitation of this or is inspired by this other thing. Um, I'm trying to think of other examples that my students have done. Let me look. Let me click over here. I have a couple other. Um, right, like so we had talked about, right? This student did these kinds of like a whole series of like little profiles for the characters from the series that she had been writing about over the course of the semester, right? Um, and she explains, right? You have the rhetorical situation here, um, and then she explains right? The character silhouettes are a different color that she associates with character, right? So for Julia Ogden, that character wears a lot of blue and is a doctor, so she chose that. I mean, it could be as simple as just saying like, I chose this color here because of this, right? I think um, the ways that you guys make decisions are almost always perfectly good and fine, right? Like something as simple as like this character wears a lot of blue and is a doctor, and so I made that character blue, right? That's perfect. All you have to do is be able to explain in your preface why you did that, right? One of the things I would have liked to see here again is like a reference, right, to some other piece of art that was something like this that she was copying or imitating. So here we have a student. I can't get everything in the frame. Darn it. Okay. A student who had written about the cartoon Coraline, and they explain that they're revising their project too, and go into a really long kind of explanation of what they're trying to do with this comic, was just pretty kind of fascinating, where they basically had decided that they were trying to um, connect the graphic novel with the film. And so this scene is actually supposed to be an extended ending that's kind of like supposed to bridge the two narratives in a really interesting way, right? What I would have liked to see again is like, right, she like references the the graphic novel several times, but doesn't include any images or pictures from that. And I would have liked to see those pictures so that I could have seen exactly the types of elements that are being copied across or being imitated, right? Let's see this last one. So here is another really interesting one that one of my students did last semester, where he actually just made a video. So he took his analysis of an advertisement, it was written, and turned it into a YouTube video where he basically analyzes the video as he is watching, or as he analyzes the video while watching the video. And so it creates this really kind of cool, you guys won't be able to hear the sound, unfortunately, here, but he basically goes through the video, playing and pausing it, and kind of like discusses the different elements. And so some of those elements are elements that were from his original essay, and other elements are things that he's talking about as he moves through it because he has more time and a different kind of sort of medium to really like analyze this advertisement. Some of the things that he did were he copied kind of like some of the stuff that we see from YouTubers, right? So at the beginning, he says, "Welcome back, everybody. It's great to see you. On today's episode, we're going to do blah, blah, blah," right? Well, like, he does not have a following. He doesn't have a channel. He hasn't been, like, there's nobody really to welcome back, but that's part of the sort of like genre conventions that YouTubers use now. And so that was something Wright mentioned in his preface, is like, when I do this new thing, I'm going to be including these sorts of things that YouTubers do as part of like the YouTubing sort of like genre, right? So that's something to pay attention to for you guys, right? If you do a podcast, again, like, how do podcasters open their podcast? Well, that's what you want to do. You want to do it exactly like they do it. And then in your preface, make sure that you say that. Make sure you say, like, I open my podcast in this specific way because that's how podcasters do it. And this is why they do it. And I closed it in this specific way because that's, that's how they do it. And it's important for me to see you guys analyzing these different types of genres and then being able to imitate those genres, and then also being able to write about how you're imitating those genres in your preface, right? So again, the preface is the hardest part. Um, and just keep in mind, like, this is the part that my students often struggle with, is they kind of like naturally, without even really thinking about it, copy the genre conventions that they're working with, right? So they do a YouTube video without even really thinking about it. They'll step into using the genre conventions there. If they do a podcast or they do a song, right? They naturally have memorized the ways that people communicate in those genres, but then they forget to write about it in the preface. So really try to think very explicitly about how you're copying things or how you're imitating those genres, and then make sure to get it in your preface. And that's it for now. Let me know if you have questions, and I'll talk to you guys soon.